Extending our hands in the spirit of reciprocity, the balance of giving and receiving. Sifa, Zote, Zendekwa, Mumba. All praise is due the Creator. Greetings. I'm Baba Brother D, B. Armand Nubian of the New Ashe, the New African Social Health Effort. And this particular video, I've got a certain amount of trepidation getting into it because I'm, going to say something disagreeing with Malcolm. Maybe I'm used to it by now because I've done so in a couple of other videos, but still, I know how a whole bunch of people feel about Malcolm. And but sometimes in the course of attempting to make more effective analysis, you may need to go against something that was said by somebody that you revere. I got a long title for this. Malcolm was wrong for the right reason, and ADOS is wrong for the wrong reason. Black identity in America. So let me repeat something that I've said in other videos. The orientation that I subscribe to, some of us call it scientific African nationalism. The systematic acquisition and application of knowledge and skills for the best interest of African people. And by best interest of African people, we mean that which is conducive to the survival and development of African people worldwide. That's the view that I'm making an effort to represent and act in line with. And a recent video, I pointed out that some of the roots of our coming upon this viewpoint, scientific African nationalism, some of those roots were in the organization that I'm currently, one of the organizations I'm currently part of, African National Science. In our earlier days, we were the Al-Kabalon Youth Collective. And one of the interesting things that we did, which I don't see much of, is that when we studied, we didn't just study to be able to quote and parrot what the authors maybe that we were reading said. We also critiqued and were prepared to disagree if we thought it was accurate to disagree, or in other words, if we thought that what the person said was not on point. And back in the 70s, from 1977 and 78, part of our curriculum included reading speeches by Malcolm out of the book Malcolm X Speaks. For example, I gave this example recently. When we studied the speech, Message to the Grassroots, and Malcolm made the statement about when we see that we have a common enemy, we unite on the basis of what we have in common, and what we have foremost in common is that enemy. And he goes on to say that the enemy is the white man, and some of y'all may not agree with that, and time will tell. But aside from what we conclude is our enemy, the question was raised, is that what we have foremost in common? And the individuals within our group would be like, no, our enemy is not whoever or whatever we conclude the enemy is. The enemy is not what we have foremost in common. Being a people, our peoplehood, we're going to come across all sorts of enemies. And maybe in this period of time, we've got a key enemy that we got to deal with. And at some future point in time, we got some other enemy that we have to deal with. But what we have in common, foremost, is not our enemy. We're talking about our peoplehood. We're talking about us being related, us being a people, us having a common ancestry, us having a common set of circumstances, experiences that relate to our common ancestry, our peoplehood. And so at this early date, and a lot of us are, some of us are in our early 20s and some of us are in our late teens, but from that period on, just because Malcolm said so did not necessarily mean that we have to agree with it. And so I'm going to pick up something that Malcolm said and attempt to explain why I think that it's problematic, but I unite with the reasons that he said it. And then I'm going to compare that to something that, to my knowledge, ADOS, the American Descendants of Slavery, that movement is saying, and challenge the purposes behind it saying it. All of this is relating to the question of who are we as a people, our identity. Now, I do have to embellish an explanation of contradicting or being seen as contradicting Malcolm because he is such an important icon. And I would have to say that Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, is, of all of the icons of the Black movement, the one who has been the most important icon of mine in my life. I get goose pimples when I listen to certain speeches by Malcolm, even though now I can point out all kinds of things that I don't agree with what Malcolm might have said in a given speech, like Message to the Grassroots, and still get goose pimples when I hear that recorded speech. And I'm contemplating an upcoming video where we will go through the whole speech and take it apart piece by piece. Because even though I don't agree with certain things now, I do not in any way diminish the force, the power of those speeches in my own development. And so also want to point out that Malcolm X is the best known of the main icons of a sector of the Black movement that I'm a part of. I'm a part of the New African Independence Movement. And the New African Independence Movement looks to a few people as central figures, but the best known, I mean, a good portion of Black folks don't know who Robert Williams is. A good portion of Black folks don't know who Queen Mother Moore is. But just about everybody know who Malcolm X is. And I also need to say, to my credit, I participate every year in an activity on Malcolm's birthday where we go to his grave, where he's buried in Ferncliff Cemetery. We ride up there in motorcade fashion in buses and cars and do a certain ceremonial thing around his grave. And I've been a participant in this activity from 1976. I've been pointing out to folks that I've been going up there on his birthday consistently. I may have all these years missed two. And from 1976 to 2019, what was that? What's that? 43 years? Malcolm only lived to be 39. I've been going up, standing over his grave on his birthday for more years than the man was alive. But if you have too much of a problem with me saying something that goes contrary to something that he said, well, then maybe you won't want to hear the rest of this video. But here we go. A lot of y'all may be familiar with Malcolm's explanation as to why we are not American. You've heard him say this, you know, in recordings. He uses the analogy of just because you're in America don't make you an American. Just because you are in a restaurant with a plate in front of you don't make you a diner. Because if you don't get to dine, then you ain't a diner. You might be sitting in the diner, but you ain't a diner because you have not gotten the opportunity to dine. And you being in America, not enjoying the fruits of being in America, he said you've only experienced the thorns, the thistles, right? You haven't got to share in any American dream. You've experienced the American nightmare. So being in America don't make you an American. I was moved by that just like a whole bunch of y'all were moved by that, but I am asserting that it is an inaccurate analysis. We're not Americans because that ain't our ethnicity. Pure and simple. If we're using the word American, if you're using the word American to mean if you're a citizen of the United States, yeah, okay, I was born here, I'm a citizen of the United States, yeah, we got that, all right? But if you are talking about some kind of ethnic identity, American, you're part of the American people. America, the people who reside in America are not a people. A bunch of different peoples reside in America. We are part of the black nation that is in the United States, along with numerous, hundreds actually, of Native American nations that reside in the United States, along with other subject peoples within the United States, along with a dominant Anglo-Saxon Protestant population that resides in the United States. We ain't the same people. Those ain't our people. We not their people. And if we grasped our not being the same people, and that the entity that we live in, the political entity that we live in, is incorrect to refer to this population as a nation, which most people, including most of us, including most black nationalists, incorrectly referring to the population of the United States as a nation, and we say things like, well, across the nation. Well, could you try to correct that, please? Say stuff like across the country, something, across the empire, all right? Across the United States. When in doubt, just spell the whole thing out. Across the United States. You say across the nation, the implication of that is that we're part of the same nation, and we're not. And if you came to grips with the reality of us being a different nation of people, a subjugated nation, a nation that does not control its own territory, a nation that does not control its own politics, its own economics. And even though we're major makers of what people often refer to as culture within this society, we don't control none of it, right? If we come to grips with that, we might get a better understanding of why certain things that you believe should have been corrected up to now have not been corrected, because the relationship between our nation and the dominant nation has not changed. The circumstances have changed, the events, the forms, the look, the feel has changed, but it has not changed. The black nation is subjugated within the American empire. And we want to make it clear, even if America treated us right, treated us nicely, gave us the various benefits that the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant dominant nation in the United States, if we got all of the stuff that they got to enjoy, we would still not be Americans. Because indeed, you do have people of certain other nationalities who enjoy everything that these folks enjoy and more. And they clear that they are not them. All right? We got to get clear on who we are. But when I say that Malcolm in this particular analysis is incorrect, he's incorrect for the right reason. He's incorrect, but he's making the effort at convincing you that we are not American. And that is correct. Just the analysis that goes along with it, that we're not American because of America's mistreatment. It's like, no, we're not American because we African, and those ain't our people. We are our people, and we should not get it twisted. See, one of the things that with critiquing important icons of ours, I'm reminded of something that the late, great Ilambe Brath, I remember him saying, we have to be about principles, P-L-E-S, and not principles, P-A-L-S, right? Making the distinction between being about certain foundational concepts and not so much about individuals who may or may not have articulated certain concepts. It's not about what the individuals have to say. It's about the correctness of the ideas that are guiding our actions. And so I want to acknowledge the pull of the questions of treatment. Treatment, how people are treated, how you feel, how you are made to feel, has a tremendous pull on us. But we make too many decisions around notions of treatment. So I can understand Malcolm making his analogy about, being American and being in the diner. A good portion of black nationalism historically has drawn on America's mistreatment of African people in America and around the world, and the mistreatment of other people by the people who run America and other Western Europeans. It's a tremendous pull. And so it's extremely tempting, and a whole bunch of us can't pass up on the temptation of wanting to organize around our sense of mistreatment. Scientific African nationalism, however, teaches that regardless of how we're treated, because we could be treated nicely, we still need to control our own circumstances as a people. That our struggle for independence, our struggle to get to the point where we have our own government and not our neo-colonial governments as dominates African people, because most black people, we made a big deal in 2008 around America electing a black man without recognizing the majority of the African population throughout the world live in governments where the head of state is a black man, right? That ain't nothing new, okay? We've been living under states where black people were in the top position since the mid-1950s. And very often, no improvement in our circumstances. The question of control, not fake control, where you got faces in high places and people from other ethnic groups run your economy, right? Sometimes they run your economy, run your military, still dictating aspects of your culture. No, we're talking about African people controlling everything that is subject to human control in opposition to any other group of people exercising that kind of power over us. And in the process, we will achieve better treatment, but not because someone else decided to treat us better, but because we're running things in our own interests. So, scientific African nationalism is clear. It's got to be about us moving closer to power, control over our own circumstances. Now, this pull around the desire for better treatment, often, here goes one of the signs of it. Black folks may lose our minds over the idea of some white person killing one of us. And a whole bunch of us don't like it when you bring up the stats that we killed more of each other. Somehow we feel like, oh, you're feeding into, white supremacy because that's what they say. Well, that's what we do, right? But our reaction to notions of treatment have us like, well, they can't be doing that to us. I'm just thinking about Rodney King, okay? Brother just got his ass beat. He didn't even die. We tore stuff up all over the place when the jury didn't convict those white officers. Because this time we caught it on film and we just knew it's on film. Y'all got to do the right thing this time. And only went to, had to experience that having it on film didn't make much of a difference. You don't understand what's wrong. What's wrong is you're part of a nation that's dominated by another nation that derives economic, political, and cultural benefit from dominating you. So they keep you in your place. And if they decide that it is in their interest at the time that they make a decision to cut a whole lot of that out, they'll cut it out. Because they can change police brutality overnight. Okay? If at some point they decide, this is cutting into our profits, look, y'all cut that BS out, right? Stop shoot, don't shoot that man. Stop it. They can stop that overnight when it is conducive to their interests. Similar to how fighting a war, I was explaining this to a brother the other day, talking about our victory over slavery. It's like, wait a minute. We were at war from day one. If you don't understand your history in this part of the world, then you need to learn it, right? We came off the boat throwing down. Africans, if there was something consistent that we did, we threw down. Individuals was cutting throats, hitting folks up in the head and setting fires and trying to run and stabbing folks up and choking folks out and doing all kind of stuff. That's what we did. Listening to some folks talk about, I could never be no slave. They couldn't do that to me. They'd have to kill me. That's exactly what happened. Between fighting and trying to escape and being worked to death, that was the circumstances of African captives brought to this part of the world. And we were worked to death by and large until the latter part of the 1700s as the economic circumstances changed and it was no longer profitable to just work us to death and buy some more. And I spoke on this in another video. But many of us want to focus on the notions of mistreatment. The relationship has never changed. If their profits require them to treat you nicer, they treat you nicer. If their profits say it don't make a difference, you poor white folks or you white folks that ain't nowhere near the ruling class, you can do with them niggas what you want to do. And at a certain point, it becomes problematic, they change. We were at war from day one. The only reason that a war was fought that seemed to be connected to the ending legally of chattel slavery in the United States, the only reason that was fought in the 1860s, after in North America, we've been here from the 1600s, is slavery was no longer consistent with the needs of the developing industrial-centered ruling class, largely based in the North. And they had a squabble with the more land-owning folks on the South who figured they could get a better deal on their product if they separated themselves politically, and the ones in the North was not having it. So they had to, they duked it out, right? And then we thinking that they duked it out for us. But their interests shifted. Just like their interests shifted in the latter part of the 20th century. After, in the 1940s, mid-1940s, America emerged supreme from World War II as the number one power on the planet. Number one capitalist power, but number one power, period. And then that segregated thing that was going on in the United States was no longer consistent with the needs of the ruling elite. You were nothing but the cannon fodder by which they brought about desegregation. They needed to bring about desegregation. How were they going to go up against what I call the local yokel whiteys, and I'm not really trying to because I'm not trying to diss white people, all right? But the ruling class needed to handle the reaction from non-ruling white folks, and black folks played the role of bringing about the desegregation from which we think we won a victory, but other people made bigger profits. But for us, in many instances, it meant better treatment, and that's what we were fighting for. We want better treatment. Well, I'm telling y'all, no. We need control over our own circumstances. And I like nicer treatment just like anybody else. But think about it. Killing me softly basically leads to the very same circumstances as killing me harshly. All right? As a matter of fact, and I'm not an advocate for wanting bad treatment. Yeah, I like not being a chattel slave. Yeah, I like being able to go into whatever store I want to and whatever side of the street I want to walk on or drink from a water fountain. Not that I drink from water fountains, y'all, because quite frankly, I don't. But if that's what I wanted to do, I like being able to do that. But that ain't what the struggle is about. And in actuality, the process of killing me softly may in some ways even be worse than killing me harshly, because attempting to kill me harshly will work up more motivation on my part to go against that process, whereas killing me softly may lull me to sleep while you take my life. The survival and development of African people worldwide is how we define our best interests. So now, in the context of all of this, what do I mean by saying ADOS got it wrong for the wrong reason? Well, in comparison to Brother Malcolm, who, as a black nationalist, wanting our people to be a more powerful people and independent people, and recognizing the need for us to break out of the false identity that our subjugators have promoted. And let me just emphasize, it serves the needs of the empire. It serves the needs of an empire to get subjects to identify their selves, the groups that they are part of, to identify with that empire. You ain't trying to get free of something and you think you down. You think you one of them. You think you included. It's like, hey, yo, this is all us. We're all American. And so forth, okay? The angle that Malcolm took in that particular explanation is problematic, right? But now we have a movement of Africans who are descendants of enslaved Africans within the United States. And we want to assert our American identity. We want to challenge the factors that have us as Americans left out, uncompensated for the things that certain Americans did to other Americans. We want to be properly brought into the fold. And in bringing us into the fold, we want it to be clear that there is something special in terms of we Americans who are descendants of enslaved Africans in this part of the world that makes us distinct from other African people and anybody else who came from anywhere else to America. Why is this problematic? One, it's problematic because it represents a set of goals which are more about allowing us to be better included as opposed to a goal that is about us becoming more independent. And in an earlier video, in a couple of earlier videos, I pointed out how I, not in sync in this question with organizations and the sector of the movement that I'm a part of, am not an advocate of reparations. I don't think that people's thinking around reparations, particularly if you are a Black nationalist, Pan-Africanist, independence-oriented individual, I don't think that it has been properly thought out. That the struggle for reparations is right in line, right in the mix with all of the other activity that is centered around folks making demands. It's part of the protest paradigm. There's a certain kind of thinking that says you correct your circumstances by making appeals to and putting pressure on people who are in charge to make a change that suits your desires. The protest paradigm. It's a way of seeing things. And analysis that I subscribe to says that the protest paradigm becomes paramount. Yeah, I like that. How the protest paradigm became paramount in our thinking. The mid-50s to the mid-60s, the civil rights, that sector, that portion of our history that we refer to as the civil rights movement. A lot of folks sleep on the changing of our very thought pattern around solving problems. Because prior to that, African people in this country clearly understood that if we have a problem, we got to solve that problem. We have no expectation of anybody else in any higher position, anybody outside of us solving a problem that we have. Might have been nice, but we have no such expectation. But now, protest is our number one means for making a change. Something go wrong? Who's in charge? Who gets paid to handle this? All sorts of questions that we ask. My favorite example, and if you be around me, you'll hear me use this again, I'm sure. I like the example that you live in a walk-up and the light bulb is out on one of the landings, so it's dark. And you and your mother and your daughter and your kids, you know, and even your brother, your father, whoever, got to walk through the dark in order to get to the apartment and we see the light bulb out, and where the thinking once would have been, okay, go in your house, get a light bulb, get a chair, come out, change the bulb, so we're not walking through the dark. The thinking became, whose job is it to fix this bulb? So now we want to deal with the landlord, the super, right? And the idea that you should go in your house and get a light bulb. I pay rent here. I'm not putting money out, for that, Our very thinking around problem solving has become quite twisted. I'm not saying that there are no circumstances where protests might not be helpful, but the thinking of our people is more crucial, and our people are locked into a belief that the only way you make improvements is by being heard by the people who are in charge. And as some of y'all might have heard me say in another video, it ain't about being heard. A lot of the times we need to learn how to not be heard. How did I say it? Instead of stand up and let your voice be heard, you need to learn to lay in the cut and shut the hell up. All right? So now, very often in efforts around improving our circumstances, folks are not in contradiction with the essentially imperialistic nature of the society that we live under. We just upset because we not getting as much of a cut. I'm accusing a lot of us of wanting to achieve junior partner status with our subjugators. I'll help you subjugate the rest of the world, but you got to cut me in on a little more than you've been giving me. And by the way, stop shooting us too. All right? Junior partner status. The degree to which we become junior partners to these people that dog the planet. Not just us, the planet. The degree to which we become junior partners with them is further degree of us becoming enemies of the planet. Enemies of the other people on this planet. Enemies of ourself, right? And some people will say ourselves, but when we talk about us collectively, hopefully there is a growing understanding that self is not individual. Self is collective. But I'll take that up at another time. But I'm not saying ourselves, our self, collective self. Wanting to be upset because other groups of people got to take advantage of something like affirmative action, right? And it was like affirmative action was for us, right? We, the people who are descended of the enslaved black folks in this country, affirmative action was for us. Affirmative action was never for us. Affirmative action was for them. I'm not talking about the other black people or people from other parts of the world, or women or anybody who could say that they were some minority status. I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about the people in charge. Affirmative action was their program, is their program. Okay? It represents a contradictory orientation to us doing for us. Us doing for us is building our own institutions, all right? As I was pointing out to somebody recently, to my knowledge, at the turn of the previous century, you had 12 medical schools. Black folks had 12 medical schools. We ain't got that now. Black folks grew a larger portion of our own food, owned a lot more property. We don't have it now, okay? Affirmative action makes us feel, even if it's totally used for American Black descendants of great-grandparents who were in this country, even if it was totally used, it ain't our program. It's a program by which someone else decides which ones of us they're going to allow to, they're going to put on, you know, a portion of us, but they're deciding who that is. And in most instances, the people who wind up being pulled in, they don't represent the Black community. They don't represent our interests. They just represent an upwardly mobile sector of our population who gets to move on up, right? Moving on up, right? That's not us doing for us. And I'm clear that there are things that we're not yet in a position to effectively do for ourselves, but we need to put in place the mentality, the mindset to build toward doing for ourselves. So now we're going to start stuff with other Black folks because we feel like, oh, they getting to take advantage of some stuff that was meant for us. You need to understand, you may have thought that was for you. It was for your slave master. It occurred to me that speaking about affirmative action, when I was saying it allows them, it's their program, allows them to pick and choose who among us they want. It adds to the brain drain. One of the powers of imperialism is that an imperialist power gets to pull on the talent of the dominated. And America, dominating the planet, it pulls on everybody, gets the best, the brightest, the creative, and so forth. Very often, in the case of Africans in America, it happens with our blessing. The effects are felt with people all over the world, where you got some poor country and they got some doctors, right, from some poor country, and they over here in the richest country practicing medicine where, you know, there's already a whole bunch of doctors. Here in the United States, African people celebrate Africans being chosen to be part of other people's institutions, even though our communities remain underserved, but we be mad proud, okay? Look at such and such, particularly if you related to them. Well, my cousin is whatever, my uncle, you know, and affirmative action firmly supports the process of our folks who are talented, I'm gonna just stick with the word talented. Sometimes it's not necessarily that an individual is brighter, but some folks show skills or aptitudes that may stand out, and our external adversaries get their pick of those individuals, and many of us can't wait to get away from our own population and be among, you got a whole bunch of Negro firsts. It was the first to do this. We were the first, to do that. And then now we're upset because their program, the program of our external adversary, they also make that special program available, because from their standpoint, they looking to get talent. They looking to get the cream. And then the folks that some of us are upset with, the average African person in all of these countries ain't who comes here. The most upwardly mobile sector of other populations come here. This is a brain drain. This is a talent drain. How do we build to protect the well-being of the masses of African people wherever we are is the crucial question, and much of that is not likely to happen through affirmative action. So when I say getting it wrong for the wrong reason, the reason of trying to get America to correct certain things that will better allow us to participate within America and be dealt with on a more equal footing with the other Americans, that is the wrong way to go. The struggle is about power, and power for African people on this planet must, circumstances dictate that it be built on a Pan-African scale. Notions of African isolation is not conducive to our best interest as a people. As a matter of fact, maybe in another video, we'll go into how the lack of Pan-African orientation is responsible not only for us being here, but has a major responsibility for the present dominance of the Euro-Western materialist world. The power of Western Europeans on this planet and the consequences that everybody, including them, are feeling as a result of their rapid climb to world power. But more at another time. Almost forgot, need to include, regardless of how you agree or disagree, to my sisters and brothers in ADOS, to my sisters and brothers who so love Malcolm X that you may really be irritated with Brother D having the audacity to disagree with Malcolm X, or to my brothers and sisters who don't like Malcolm X and never did, or any other icons that I might like, or any of the other ideas. I'm saying I want to see you be tight with small group of people of your liking, folks who agree with some of the main ideas you think are important, or people who agree with the religion that you believe you follow, or people who practice the lifestyle that you practice, the diet that you practice, live on your block, whatever may serve as the commonality, or y'all just like each other because you just mad cool. 4 of y'all, 5, 7, 10 of y'all form something tight. And in those groups, develop certain kinds of skills that we have not been developing. The skills to be able to hash out ideas, to disagree and not agree to disagree, as people say, but to disagree and be able to get into it, to be able to, really get into it and get down deep and try and struggle to achieve higher levels of agreement, higher levels of coordination, learning the skills of emergency preparedness, learning developing the tendencies to be on each other's case around our very numerous health issues, because our health is largely whack. We need each other, and you need folks who are tight with you, who gonna get on your case when you're doing some knuckleheaded stuff, and you get on their case as well, because it is crucial for Africans. You got a problem with Africans from some other part of the world? All right, so form a tight group with Africans who are only, to your knowledge, descendant of Africans whose great-grandparents were here. Whatever. Be tight with some other black folks so we can develop the kind of capacity that will allow different collectives to then work together on a higher level to build more major programs affecting larger numbers of African people, and eventually our total liberation, self-determination of African people worldwide. I'm Brother D. Thank you for listening.